So according to our last example, we had completed uh, add items through this particular view controller. So this item makes sure the entered fields or values being synchronized with the server, and you get a successful message. According to that, it gets dismissed and comes back and refresh this particular table view based on whatever you performed, either edit or delete. Add. Maybe subsequent addition is going to be edit and delete also going to follow the same way. We have seen a similar example in core data where we gave a edit option. Same way I'm going to adapt, except it is going to make the call to web service. Other than it is pretty in the same way. Okay, let me start. So we need to distinguish the plus, the add form or whatever the event which is performed on this plus this one. Whenever I click on the table view items or table view cell, so that is also going to go to the same view controller, but we just need to bring the data from remote servers. So let's see how I can do it. First thing, I need to put a couple of segues maybe. So I've also added one more label for that. Just felt pretty odd, like keeping one single item. You can put as many as label. You can put in even an image. You can play around with that because it's just a custom view. You can handle in various ways. So I just added one more view so that just displays the cost associated with that. I'm also thinking about adding a header with the total cost of given category. Maybe in an advanced section we can see that. But at this point, let us put a segue to handle. Okay, so this is the cell. Whenever the user click on cell, we're going to take the user to same view controller. So there are two segues. One segue doesn't have a name, and another one is for add. Okay, I'll do it. Or this one as an edit segue, the newly added one. So whenever the cell is clicked, it will call the segue and go to this particular view controller. So first we'll make sure it works. Okay, does go. So clicking on the cell also taking me to the view controller. Okay, I prefer to change this title slightly bigger. Okay. So this particular navigation item back button, I would like to keep just back instead. A cancel we can keep. Okay, going ahead, I would like to do some modification to add edit view controller. First point, for edited object, I need a NS dictionary coming from the previous view controller. So I'm going to need couple of objects. According to the last example, same way I'm going to follow. On atomic retain NS dictionary. This item will keep because it is not a array which is going to have a multiple data. It's going to be a single item. So this one may be synthesized. Okay. Few thing, if the item already existing, we have to display the item in the text fields. So maybe at this point, if item is defined, if item is having valid objects, it just assuming that item is initialized. If it is initialized, so it will open them and display those values. So first one, item name field, set text. object for a key. We need to know what kind of object we have kept it. We'll come back to them as a whole. So I hope I have 3 fields: item price and item quantity. So I'm holding in shopping table view controller. When web service perform pull all the items record. So all items under an attribute called items being saved in my what you call array. So each iteration may be having some object. So we'll have to see our web service document in order to identify which key it is associated. Let me take the document. Okay. So get all items. So this one is an array. It looks like the array has each object. So according to Objective C or Swift, it is a NS array, and inside each occurrence there is a NS dictionary exist. So NS dictionary may be containing all the information, of course, because we are not modifying anything, we are not excluding anything so far. So these keys are associated: item underscore name, item underscore quantity, item underscore price. So let me go back. So just preloading those values. So now we'll try to see how it works. Before that, we have to complete the segue handle. So this is prepare for segue, which makes sure which segue is being called. So I can add. Okay, I'll leave the comment also. The segue identifier is equal to the string. I hope I gave a name edit segue. So whenever edit segue is called, I can identify which view controller is going to be the destination. So in my understanding, it is going to be add edit view controller, which I've already added the import. So add typecasted, because the destination view controller of any type possible. So segue destination view control. Sorry, this is not needed. Dot notation, since I have used, nothing is required. So add edit controller. So I can point add edit controller item with whatever value the user click. So I need to get the selected index first before pointing it. So let me get a NS integer selected index something. We have a table view built in. So selected row at index path. No, not that one. Index path for selected rows. Okay. Index paths. This is always happening to me. Index path for selected row. This guy is complaining. Okay, unused. Okay, that doesn't matter. So we don't know which object need to be sent in the destination view controller. So now I'm just trying to say item, it's called item. So shopping list items, object at the index to the selected. This guy is compiling. Select conversion compatible pointer. Oh, sorry, the integer is a primitive type. We don't need to give a pointer location. That's fine. String and other thing requires a pointer. The integer itself number, so we don't need to give a pointer, and we are fine with that. So the selected index being passed, and this dictionary would be having a value over here. So that's fine. So at this point, I should be able to see the value is populated by default whenever I click on the table view cell. So I have the values of populating. So whatever the value what I've entered. Now we have to make sure the edit works that way. Also, we have to make sure the plus does not come with any value, or it doesn't work. Force closing or some other way, because some object might not have initialized. Because for adding, I am not sending the item value, whereas I am sending this item whenever the user press on edit. So this item will have a valid object mapping whenever the user perform edit action. That's the reason I put a if condition over here. So this is a recommended practice saying that this particular object either has initialized or not. If the object initialized, this object will get initialized only when the user click on edit, or maybe clicking on the table view cell. When the user click on the add button, this particular object might not have initialized, and it won't call this particular block. So that will avoid any kind of access to object which is not initialized. Also, I'll try to make sure the edit works still. Just I'm adding some random numbers. Just need time to refresh. Okay, it works. Okay, let us make the edit. First, see what is the RESTful URL for adding edit. Update an existing item. So this is for updating an item. What are all the payload needed? It requires username, password, item ID additional one, item name, item quantity, item price. There are all bunch of things needed. So let us when the save button is pressed, we have to build a different payload. So it looks like I am going to do a separate callback. Okay. We may need a if else block. Say if item initialized, this is for edit, else add. So two blocks. So I'm going to use a NS payload as slightly defined over first, then I call it. So this is for add, and I'm going to need one more block for edit. So this time the payload is going to be similar, but with additional options or additional attribute added or additional payload added. So username, password, item quantity, item price, everything is there. We need to send the item ID as well. So I'm going to add that as well. And item ID. percentage at, which is missing. Okay. It is going to be inside of this NS dictionary object for a key. So what is the object for that particular key? We can identify from here item underscore ID. Okay, so this is the additional one we are sending, item ID. So let me see the payload is correct or not. Item name, item price, item ID. The order could be anyway, so you don't need to worry about it. Just the payload has to reach there. So item ID. So this is the payload for editing, and it is going to make the web service callback. Call web service URL, this time a different URL with a payload. Yes, we have, and with the type. This is going to be an interesting point. Edit, what we have given here. Right. Okay, the URL, let me get the URL. Okay. When this particular URL is called, of course, at one point it is going to call here, and we need to get the successful result. Let us see if we get a successful result. If the item gets edited or not, we'll come to know at this point, since I'm calling a different URL for editing. Name text. Okay. I'm editing this one. Sorry. Edit. So just edited. So the edit also working at this point. I can edit anything, any feature, any kind of a value. Does the edit. Remember, each and every point the application is synchronizing with the server. It makes sure the data is updated in the server, then it updates here. That's the reason you see a slight delay here. But still we use the kind of a loader here to make sure the user knows about some sort of processing is going on. So at this point we made this particular code as editable. So we can also edit the values, not only adding them. So we can also edit particular items. Now we have to add only delete so that the entire part would get completed. So as of now I haven't added anything for delete, but clicking it is going to force close my application. So we'll work on adding the delete feature to this example. Delete also is going to be pretty simple because we have a web service URL for that purpose. We'll try to do that. Let's see. So the delete happens in the table view controller itself because the delete option has been given in the table view controller, where we simply swipe from the rightmost corner. So the event for deleting is executed here. Edit style, when editing style called delete is called, it is going to be executed over here. I'm not going to need this because mine is going to be highly dependable on what I call web service. This part I'm not going to need. So first part, what is the web service URL for deleting? So this deleting item, which require username, password, and the item ID. So it requires an item ID, which is the same I needed for my edit option as well, because using that maybe as a primary key it is using editing. So let's find. First point, I need a NS user default. because I need a username and password which need to be sent. Sorry. Okay, I'll do one thing. I'll just copy from my previous courses. There are a bunch of NS user defaults are there. I'll take this one. Okay, username, password. But item ID is alone enough, so we don't need the item name and other parts. So I'm going to remove them. The rate and item ID. So rest of the part we can remove. Okay. This one based on the index. So first thing I need NS dictionary. So that's going to be from shopping items object at the index. Whether the index being given here as an argument, yes, I hope it is there. Index path is there. So index path. So we have item with the selected. Now we have the payload ready, which is sending the username, password, and item ID, and it's going to make a web service call to the URL. We check payload is ready, and type it is for delete item. Okay. So this delete item is going to give me some sort of callback. The same affirmative, it's okay. So that's pretty easy for us to handle. So it will give a callback here, and it will refresh the table. So whenever the user perform delete, it's going to happen. Let's see how it works. So we have to delete this one. Something went wrong. I pray the web service does not malfunction, but let's see. Okay. It looks like it deleted. It deletes, but something is not refreshing. Okay, let's identify why it is not refreshing. But anyway, the delete works, but due to some reason, this gets, it makes a callback here. Okay, I do understand. Now it's a need because this particular response is given for when the URL is calling get all items. So that was called in the reload shopping item or somewhere. I hope this one. So this one was giving me the particular result. Now for deleting, I may be getting this response which does not carry the information whatever the items are associated. So I need to distinguish which URL is actually calling this particular block get response from. So it's a time to add if I'll verify one more time what is the URL extra payload I'm sending. It's called get all item. So I'm differentiating, and if the type is get all item, this particular option is to be performed. Else, or maybe else if type is equal to the string, what we are giving for delete it. Okay, if that case, I need to do the same. In fact, I need to make sure I get the OK successfully deleted. Once I successfully delete, I need to reload all the item. Back to back, another web service being called, because to fetch the item after deleting. So this block differentiate for which URL callback it is triggered. I mean, this particular delegate is being triggered. So let's see. This point should work. I click, just disappears. See that when I click on delete, it just takes a while to finish it because of it is synchronizing with the server, and also make sure the view is updated according to the data whatever your server contains. So we also made sure delete. It is also recommended to put an alert before deleting. That's the best practice. We do not let the user delete an item so easily. So when the user click on delete, it is recommended practice to put a UI alert controller saying that are you really want to delete this. When the user say an affirmation, then we'll do it. That part I'm going to cover on the advanced topic. So how the user navigation should be, what is the recommended practice. So that probably the right way of having them. And also I just want to make sure the add also works after performing all these actions. It works. I can also change it. Okay, everything working fine. Remember this iOS design, or maybe the application we see some sort of bouncing option you would have always seen in most of iOS components. The bouncing, in fact, it is a kind of user navigation. This is the way we can even give a, or we can let the user to I think it's a duplicate item, let the user to do some sort of action associated with that. For example, refreshing, or maybe synchronizing some data with this. For example, a list of mail. So if you have a list view which is showing the list of mail, once it simply bounce down, it will go to the web server and again refresh your mail, and it will fetch the new item whatever added to that. So this particular bounce can also be used to refresh your containers, especially table. So that also I'll complete it. So for example, instead of adding, if you feel some data are missing, you can still refresh by bounce it down, and the container will get refreshed. So that also we could make it happen, and then up to that we will conclude it, so that the entire application is synchronizing with the cloud data or remote data. And of course, the user has the privilege to use the same login across different devices, and he can still get back all the data associated. So I'll finish with that. That is called, the particular view is called UI refresh control. So I'm just going to add a UI refresh control. You can programmatically initialize in the same way so far we have been doing. Initialize your refresh control and make sure you add the target. This is, for example, whenever UI refresh control is called, what is the action it need to perform? I just say the context being self, and action whenever the refresh control is called, which function you would like to call. I have to declare the function. I don't have a function yet. Okay, for UI control event value change, whenever value changes. So I need a selector usually a function. So that you can call refresh called this particular function. So you can get a callback. Okay, so when the user simply pull down the list view, it will call this particular block. You can handle to dismiss it or do something with that. So I'll just show you what exactly it has done before adding it into the web service. If you see that, it should synchronize with that. Let me see the flash controls not synchronizing. Selector. We need to add it to the table view. I have been connected with the table view. That should be added as a sub view. Sub view mean, for example, you have a view. Typically, in this case, I've already been given an example. A view controller is nothing but it is having a view object inside various views being added. So for a view label, this is one first subview, text field is a second subview, password field is a third subview, and this particular UI text field is a fourth subview. So like that, subviews are getting added to the base view. So in this case, I have a table view. I'm adding a subview, mean I'm just adding a refresh control over to my table. So how it is going to appear, let's see. You see that when I just pull it down, it just call a kind of refresh. So it just keep rolling until, when you release it, for example, when you pull it down and when you release it, this particular block will be called. For example, the selector what we have defined, where is that? This one, it's going to be called. So I'm going to use this for refreshing my application, and it doesn't get dismissed until I call it stop. So I need to stop it. I need an instance of my refresh control. Okay, I can also make sure I can send the context. If this particular selector expecting an argument, you can give a colon like this. So this particular context, whatever you are adding, would be sent as an argument. So in this case, you may expect refresh control argument being so if you want to send the context along with them, make sure you add a colon. So you can also pass whatever the context you added. That's the reason the add target has come. The context in this case, the refresh control object itself. So the object would be sent as an argument at this point. Now this particular refresh control begin and end refresh. So whenever it is performed, I'm going to call the function called reload shopping item. Seems to be my internet connection is very bad today. Okay, if I pull it down, if you see that it start refreshing. So it just a refresh callback. It should dismiss by default because it's just going to get all the data again one more time. Reload shopping item, how it is calling. Stop animating. Yeah, it's looking good only. I'll try one more time. Okay. Yeah, it just disappears. So I can pull it down to refresh my list view. This would be useful if you are manually want to refresh an item. So you would have seen this interface in your iOS mail application. And of course, this is now getting popular in Android as well, I hope, because most of the Android application has some sort of, when you pull it down, some sort of refresh control appears on the top. Actually, this is an idea from iOS, and later Android copied that. So that particular thing you can add for a table view controller. So when the user pull it down, the container refresh itself. And in this case, whenever the user perform, I'm just going to reload everything, because it will make the callback to my server and load all the items whatever associated. For example, you have logged this application in two different phones. In one phone you are adding an item, in second phone you are not seeing the item populated. So in that case, you simply pull it down, get the items added, and you'll have the new items synchronized with this device as well. So this is the complete example of a cloud based, what we call cloud means data is external, so data is getting synchronized. So we just gave a fancy name called cloud based shopping list item. So it makes use of various web service URL. None of the data is saved in the local device. Every data is there in the remote server, but through web service callbacks, every item is being synchronized with the user name associated. So every instance, I am sending the username to make sure the data fetched of that particular user alone. So if you are registering with a new user and you're going ahead, of course the data will be associated to that user, so you will see the new items or new shopping items getting created. So since the data externally stored, you can make sure shifting between different devices still end up getting all the data synchronized with the new device. So this is the strategy almost all enterprise mobile application going to use. So that's the reason I just gave it as a simple example, and the whole example in fact made use of various strategies so far we have studied. This application make use of delegates, I mean protocol delegates. This application make use of thread or UI NSURL session and processing the response in a different thread. And this application make use of navigation controller and manual segue, manual back segue, and various other way of handling the UI stack. There are a whole bunch of things we have discussed so far. Along with the new one, what we have talked is UI refresh control, which we add it as a subview to a table view. So in my understanding, it works pretty well with the table view. I haven't tested with the other component, but somehow you can also make sure it could work. But it is a kind of I mean dependent on the table view controller. So that also we have seen, and also one of a small in fact these are kind of thing are going to come in advanced topic, but still a selector, if you really want to pass an argument, usually selector we define a function. If you really want to send an argument, you can send the context whatever associated. So the context in this case self mean this UI refresh control, so that this refresh control object being injected as a argument over here, so that I'm using it for end refreshing. If you could not send the object or argument through this function, you would have to have this UI refresh control defined as a global object. Then only you could have made sure that object can be called. But I still made sure that local object, but still it is accessed outside of the other function through which I am passing the same object in the argument. So this is how it works. So this is the example. I'll upload these, all the source code.